I would like to get us started by just saying welcome to the accreditation webinar. This is from NAAEE. This project is a project of NAAEE, and it's funded through our partnership with EPA, the EE 360 Plus. And ignore my clock. It always dings and dongs and makes all sorts of noises. But this is what we're hoping to accomplish over the next about an hour or thereabouts, is just some quick introductions of my co-presenters here. We're going to give you something of an overview of accreditation, and we're going to then give you a little bit more information about what it would mean to you if you or a partner were wanting to get your programs accredited. We're going to give you some examples. There's a check-off list that we're going to just show you briefly, and some time for questions from you. So some introductions. My name is Bora Simmons, and I'm the director of the National Project for Excellence in Environmental Education, which is a project of NAAEE, and I'm out in Eugene, Oregon. And I'm going to turn it over to Billy to let Billy introduce himself.
My name is Billy Bennett. I'm the Executive Director of the Kentucky Environmental Education Council, and for 10 years prior to me moving into state government, I worked at EKU with Melinda.
Cool. Patty?
Hi, everyone. I'm Patty Bourne. I'm joining this call from Hamline University in St. Paul, Minnesota. And I've been here about 8 years, and the program here is a master's in environmental ed. And I'm just really happy to be here. Nice to see everybody. Thanks for coming.
Becca?
Hello, it's nice to meet you all. I'm Becca Franzen. I'm an associate professor at the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point. And we have accredited and then just recently reaccredited our program that's an environmental education and interpretation major for undergraduate students. Thank you.
Yeah, and Melinda.
Hi, everybody. I'm retired from Eastern Kentucky University, where Billy and I worked together for many years. We developed the program there, and we're accredited many years ago and reaccredited last year. We have an environmental education endorsement. It's now also a certificate. It's nice to meet everybody.
Cool, thank you. So just to give you a brief, sort of excitement about what's going on with accreditation, we have been accrediting a number of institutions, the 3 institutions represented on this call, but also Antioch and Colorado College, Montreat, Nova, Penn State, Slippery Rock, Southern Oregon University, the College of New Jersey, University of Minnesota, Duluth, and obviously Wisconsin-Stevens Point. One of the things that we'll go into in this call is just the notion of the variety of different types of programs and the variety of types of universities that can be accredited. We have smaller universities or colleges, we have larger ones, we have private ones, we have public ones. So, this is something that is a flexible program that meets lots of different needs. So I'm going to turn it over to Becca. Up, you're muted. Yep.
I know, I hate it when that happens. I think you clicked it, you didn't really click it. I'm sure you can all relate. Great. So it's great. It's really helpful to read through your responses. So thanks. And if you haven't posted where you're at in the accreditation process, where you're from, it would be wonderful to hear. So what is accreditation really? Well, it's through the North American Association for Environmental Education. It's a self-study. And so you are going to be reviewing your own materials and submitting materials for folks to review for you. And it's standards-based. So it's using those NAAEE guidelines and the themes associated with those professional development of environmental educator guidelines. for you to explore and examine really how is the work that you're doing, both your teaching and the assessment of learning, how does that connect to those guidelines for excellence? And accreditation also provides a formal recognition where you are recognized through NAAEE. You can put that NAAEE logo on your website, and it's something that you can really be proud of and let the recruiters for your institution and your dean of your college know that you are accredited, and others too. Additionally, accreditation, and you can go ahead and advance the slide, Bora. It provides that third-party recognition. So there are several reviewers that read through all of the materials and critique the work that you've been doing. So they provide that outside expertise and look at your program offerings, how it is that you've aligned your teaching and your assessment with the guidelines. And what I really appreciate about accreditation is that in-depth and continual assessment and improvement, right? I know it's sometimes assessment can be viewed as a bit of a dirty word, right? Especially at a university campus. And accreditation certainly feeds into your assessment. There's always that you can do at your institution, but there's always that opportunity for improvement and recognizing strengths as well as weaknesses so that you can continue to really make change and identify what your gaps are, your challenges, and also what you're doing really well. So you can advance to the next slide. There are some internal reasons and also some external reasons as far as why it is that you might want to be accredited, right? So some internal reasons that you might want to be accredited. Well, definitely that you're being measured up against well-accepted environmental education criteria. The professional development of environmental educators guidelines have been through multiple iterations, and then they've been reviewed by professionals in the field every time. There are all sorts of great resources identified within, examples that are identified within and through the websites that we provide for you. So you know that you are comparing the work that you do to what's accepted in the field. Through that self-study and through your reflection, you're also really looking at evidence-based improvement and program improvement over time. So what is it that you're doing? How can you get better? And by having that time to really explore as a faculty unit at your university or as an individual at your university. It can also clarify what your program goals are, your objectives, and your implementation. I know at UW Stevens Point, where I work in central Wisconsin, it's really helped us to fine tune, like, what is the purpose behind these various classes. Sure, we always have purposes behind what it is that we teach, right? But how does it really align with those well-accepted environmental ed criteria? What gap does it fill, or what goals are we accomplishing through this particular course? Or how can we tighten it just this bit to make it that much better? Additionally, another internal reason is that it documents program successes. So I appreciate that I have full record of good work that we're doing that I can talk to colleagues about, that I can share with students about. And we've certainly found that accreditation does attract and retain students and their parents, because let's be honest, parents are doing all sorts of looking at institutions, and they like to see that a program is accredited. And so having that NAAEE logo on our website, I know has made a difference in talking to potential students and current students. When I ask them why they chose UWSP, I've had students tell me that they've chosen it because we're accredited. As far as some external reasons, and Bora, you can switch to the next slide. Some external reasons, well, it certainly shows external folks like employers, funders, and donors that you're doing really good work and that you're recognized by a third party for doing that great work. It shows that you're using best practices, you're preparing well-qualified graduates, right? There's this stamp of approval from an external entity on your program. And it also gives a chance to share best practices with other institutions, which enriches all programs and the profession. I will say another, just another example of how accreditation has helped us at UW-Stevens Point. I know that our alumni, I've heard from a number of alumni that they are proud that our institution is accredited through UWSP. So I think it certainly helps in that regard. And also, I should have mentioned this on the internal reasons slide, but there was actually a situation where a course was considered being cut at our institution. And for me to be able to point to it and say, this is how it helps us meet this accreditation, that was actually really beneficial for me and that particular course. So just some reasons why. And yes, please, if you have any questions or anything in the chat as we go along, go ahead and insert those. I have one more slide that I'd like to share as far as who should apply for accreditation with NAAEE. We really want, our team was talking last week and we're like, you know, we really want everybody to realize that anyone can apply. There's really a lot of flexibility in this accreditation, which I appreciate. It's not limited to US institutions, right? So folks from across the globe can seek out accreditation from NAAEE for your higher education program. And you might wonder, what is a program? Well, as you can see here by our listing, it's really broad. Our definition is, and so it can include majors like the program that we've accredited. We've considered accrediting a minor program as well that we have in environmental education. It also accredits certificate programs, endorsement programs, and integrated studies. So what's most helpful for you is no matter what institution it is that you're at, no matter where you're at in the globe, no matter what your program looks like, it's for you to take a look at the 6 themes within the guidelines and to consider, you know, are we teaching to these 6 themes? Are we assessing to these themes? And how would you provide evidence for that? And so then you might be wondering what those themes are. So I'll turn it over to Patty for that.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, great. So there are 6 major themes that we ask that each program or certificate or whatever you're putting up for accreditation kind of identify and adhere to and show evidence of meeting. And those are identified here: environmental literacy, foundations of environmental ed, so kind of best practices and kind of an understanding of the history of environmental ed, professional responsibilities of the environmental educator, or things like dispositions. We use that term in a lot of institutions. Planning and implementing environmental ed programs, fostering, learning, and promoting inclusivity, and then assessment and evaluation. So we really are looking for programs to meet or exceed kind of the expectation of students achieving competence in each of these areas. I believe that Bora just dropped a link in the chat, which would allow everybody to go ahead and download this guide, the Guidelines for Excellence, which walks you through each of these themes in greater detail, and then has a number of different documents that we're going to get into throughout this presentation. But I highly recommend that you go ahead and download that, the guidelines, because they're really helpful in planning out kind of how you will approach accreditation, or what you need to be thinking about as you're thinking more seriously about whether or not this is right for you. Billy?
Yes. Okay, so maybe you're thinking, this sounds like something I'm definitely interested in and would like to do that. So we're going to, I'll just go over what's required, and then as we go along in the presentation, they'll get more and more detailed and show some examples. So you have to complete a self-study audit. You have to document how the program design is aligned to each of the 6 themes, And then also document how program participants are assessed against each of those 6 themes. And then you have to compile and report a minimum of 2 years of data for that. All right, Bora. So how is accreditation awarded? So your self-study audit will be reviewed by a panel of environmental education professionals. I think almost everyone that's presenting today has done that at different institutions. And then the review panel uses a rubric to determine if the program meets each of the themes, and all 6 themes must be met at an acceptable or target level, both in program design and participant assessment as defined in the program review rubric, which I think Patty is going to tell you a little bit more about that.
Yep, thanks. So as Billy mentioned, this is the program review rubric. And so this is kind of what we look at to see not only the alignment of the design of the program, but also the assessment of the participants in the program. So it's important to think about both of those kind of as being on a balance. So we're really looking, this is an example of the rubric that we use for theme number 2, Foundations of EE, but of course this is pretty similar across the board, and really looking at kind of what is the evidence that you provide the committee for your accreditation. How are you showing, how are you giving kind of a preponderance of evidence that you are meeting a majority or all of the components necessary for this theme? So the theme, of course, goes beyond that sentence at the top, but it's all of the sort of sub themes underneath. And you don't have to be exhaustive with every theme and every sub theme. We're really looking for just kind of, well, a preponderance of evidence is kind of our favorite term to use around here, because we're looking for clear evidence that not only your program design meets a majority or all of the components, but that your assessments and artifacts that students or participants in your program are completing also show that evidence. Any questions on that before we go to the next slide? I'm not looking in the chat, so if there are, okay, thanks. Okay, thank you, Bora, you can go on. So the packet that you're going to put together for your self-study is several steps, and it seems pretty onerous, but it's not that bad. The first one is the cover sheet, and that's just a completed form. We provide a template in the guidebook. The second section is where you really get into kind of the data about your program. If you've ever written grants, you've probably done this 100 times, kind of the mission, the vision, philosophy and goals of your program, any relevant partners or other information that you think it's helpful for us to have just to contextualize the work that you're doing. And then section 3 is where you really get into the details of the templates and the forms and the tables that we're going to go through. So you'll complete a course and experience information sheet for every course or experience that you're submitting as part of your sort of dossier of evidence. And then there's another table that's a program alignment and assessment alignment sheet, and then also a sheet that goes over the assessment results. And we have a sample on the next slide to show you. So this is the course alignment matrix for a program that was recently submitted for accreditation. And it's really clear and defined. So every class that's part of the degree program is listed here along the left side. And then let's take, for example, the class called biomes. So this class provides advanced level of mastery, or an advanced level. It meets all of the criteria associated with theme number 1 for environmental literacy. It doesn't actually address any of the themes or sub-themes for foundations of environmental ed or the professional responsibilities and dispositions. And that's okay. Every programmer, or I'm sorry, every course or experience doesn't have to meet every single theme all the time. It's okay if they only meet some of them. It meets a majority of the guideline or the themes and sub-themes for theme 4, planning and implementing. Again, a majority for theme 5. And when it comes to theme 6, assessment and evaluation, that's not something that's addressed in that class. So NA was the response there. And as you see, kind of looking at the whole program here, you see that there are enough 3s and 2s throughout, that the program seems to cover all themes pretty adequately, if not more than adequately. So it's important to know that you don't have to cover every theme and sub-theme for every single experience or course in the program. It's okay if they're 2s and 3s here and there. Thanks.
So on to Melinda.
Hi.
Yes, thank you.
So Bora has put a couple links in the chat box that might help clarify some of the things as we go along. So the professional development of EE guidelines, as was said earlier, that has the different themes and sub-themes in. And then she put the link for the higher ed accreditation manual. You'll see all these forms and tables we're talking about with instructions in that accreditation manual. So on the slides where you saw, you know, like table 3, page whatever, the page whatever comes from the higher accreditation manual. So you may want to take a minute and open that up on your computer if possible, just to refer back to as we move along, because this does sound pretty involved until you take a minute to kind of put the pieces all together. So for each of the courses or experiences that you list in table 3, you have to have an information sheet. And I want to emphasize that it doesn't have to be a course. It can be an experience. Many of the colleges and universities have some kind of internship experience, or they have to work at a nature center sort of experience, and those count. They don't have to be a course. So you'll see the word course or experience used as we move along. I'm just going to warn you, Bora, I do love animation, so you're going to have to click a lot for me. So next click, please. So the course experience information form is simple. You start with the course title or the experience title, and then just give a brief overview. If it's a course, you already have a catalog description, and that's what you use there with the number. If it's an experience, just, you know, do a couple sentence overview of what it is. Next, please. Yeah, then the course assignments and assessing the student work. So this is important in that you only use the assignments and assessment that meet the themes. So I'll show you some examples in just a minute. So if you have other assessments in the course that have nothing to do with the themes, then you don't have to list those. And lastly, please, Bora. Course topics. So all the topics that are covered in the course. Great. Next slide. So here are some examples. Bora, so they're hot links, Bora. So go ahead and so this is Ecology for Teachers course. Notice it has the course overview, just like you would have it in your course catalog. There are several assessments. If you could scroll down just a bit. Okay, and those are the only assessments that are related to the themes. There are other assessments in the course, but they're not listed here because they don't help provide evidence for meeting the themes. And then lastly, you'll see the course topics. Yeah, if you can go back to the slideshow and just hit the other hot link for one more.
I'm not sure this one. Yeah, sorry about that.
Oh, need access. Okay. I thought I just edited that. Well, whatever. We'll just skip over it, but it's the same sort of thing. Next slide. Okay, so you take all the information you have gathered together about your courses in table 3 and the course information sheets, and you put it into this table called Program Design Alignment, Assessment Alignment, and Assessment Results Chart. In just a minute, I'm going to show you an example of that. But for those of you who downloaded the accreditation manual, I'd like you just to take a minute and find this in that accreditation manual. It should be on page 12. I think 12 and 13. And for me, it would, it helps me to see that as well as looking at an example. So yeah, on page, actually it's, yeah, page 12, it describes what goes in all the columns. And then on page 13, actually it's on page 15, it shows the actual chart or table. So yeah, Bora, if you will click and then hit the hot link to that example. Yeah, great. So that example is actually found on the higher ed website as well. I'm going to just talk about the columns for a minute and then we'll see some examples. So notice the first column is the name of the course or experience that you are suggesting gives evidence. Those courses are the same ones in table 3. Those courses are the same ones that you did an information sheet for. Then there's a column that said, how are the guidelines taught? So what teaching methods do you use? Do you lecture? Do you have discussion groups? Do they do projects? Do they have debates? And that you title that methods, and then you list the topics that are included in that course. So those topics would align with the topics on your course information sheet. So a lot of this is not new material, just recycled. How were the participants assessed? So remember the assignments that you put on your course information sheets, those go in this column. And then how is competency evaluated? So, okay, so let's say your students are putting together an environmental ed curriculum for elementary schools. That's one of the projects. How do you assess that assignment? Do you use a rubric? Is it just based on completion? I would think many of you have a rubric or a scoring guide for something like that. If it's a traditional test assessment, which the Ecology for Teachers has, then it's just a traditional right or wrong answers on the test assessment. And then the last column is the summary of the assessment results for the past 2 years. So notice spring 2017 or spring 2016, whatever semester this course was offered, how many participants passed the course or passed the assessments, excuse me, passed the assessments at the level needed. So scroll down one page for us, please, Bora. Okay, so here's a good example. So this is for theme 1, environmental literacy. Notice there's 4 sub-themes there. And so this university had a course called Sustainability Issues and Investigation, and the methods for it in the second column were lecture, discussion, project-based learning, and then the topics are listed there. The assignments are course embedded assignment, written paper and presentation that focuses on the investigation of sustainability related issue. The tool was a rubric. Notice it says appendix. You have to put all your assessments and the tools that you assess it with in an appendix. And then competency, so acceptable or target on the rubric. And then notice how many of their participants met that level. Great, let's skip down to maybe theme 6 for fun, the last one. Yeah, right there, yeah. Theme 6 is about assessments. And notice in the second row that some of the courses hit several of the sub-themes. And so that's why you see 6.1, 6.2, 6.3 there. And again, they have a lot of 100% participants met their requirements at the same level. And that's to be expected in a lot of programs. But truthfully, when we turned ours in, we didn't always have 100%. So it's okay not to have 100% there. Great. Okay, Bora, I think we're ready for unless people, do you have any questions about that table? Again, if you read about it in the accreditation manual and look at the samples on the higher ed website, I think it would become fairly clear. Okay, great. Let's go back to the next slide, please. So after you've filled out all your forms, all your self-study audit, the last thing there is a checklist to make sure that you have everything you need before you turn in. And so that checklist is just, again, for you to make sure you've dotted all your I's and crossed all your T's. Next slide, please. This slide just is talking about the resources. I urge you to go to the Higher Education Accredited URL. If you have not yet, you'll see all, I mean, you don't have to do it right this minute, but it has all the resources that you'd want. It has examples. It also has the universities that have been accredited there, so that might be helpful to you as well. And now what we're going to do is each of us are going to talk about our program. Again, you'll find that our programs are significantly different from each other, and we all have been accredited. So next, please, Bora. Click one more time. Billy, you want to talk about this?
Once I get moved. So I was not there for the reaccreditation, and the programs changed quite a bit. We used to offer it just as a graduate level course, and then we decided we were going to make them a split level course, graduate and undergraduate. And then now we've kind of even morphed that into the certificate program that we have today. So we can attract folks out of from different disciplines. They don't have to be teachers in order to take those courses. So it's really kind of expanded our offering. And when we went through that process, it was a completely different process. It was much more difficult. It was through the NCATE program when I was there, but I'll let Melinda talk a little bit more about the newest one, since she worked on that and I did not. Well, I helped a little, but not much. So go ahead, Melinda, if you want to.
Okay, click again, please, Bora. So our whole program is 12 semester hours. We have 4 courses. We have 2 required courses. One is Ecology, and the other one is Environmental Education Essentials, which is basically the history and philosophy of environmental education. And then students get 2 electives, one from each area of one from one each from two areas. Sorry, one area being environmental issues and the other area being teaching methods. And then we now allow an internship to substitute for the teaching methods course. Bora, if you will click on that hot link, they'll see our program sheet, and that'll help them scroll down. So the program requirements, you can see at the top, we have the ecology with environmental education essentials, the ecology for teachers or another ecology class. And then they have the environmental issues choices and then the teaching methods choices. Those folks that are actually pre-service teachers, they have an education major, they can use their science methods course as one of their requirements. So they don't have, they can double dip there. So yeah, that's our course. That's our program. Pretty simple, but it gets the job done. Thanks. We're going to turn it over to Becca. Are you next?
Yeah, yep. Yeah, it's great to see what yours looks like, Melinda, especially in comparison to mine. So we're kind of the opposite edge. We're the end of the spectrum, maybe. We're a full-blown environmental education and interpretation major, 120 credits total. And so when I put together our accreditation packet and reaccreditation packet, which happens 7 years after your initial accreditation, I just try to remember, keep it simple. Keep it simple. Don't include everything, because I don't know why I want to include everything, but just keep it simple. What is focused on and linked to the NAAEE guidelines. So to share a couple of slides about our program, I thought it might be helpful for you to see how it is that we filled out our table 4. And so this is our alignment with theme 1, and theme 1 is connected to environmental literacy. So the environmental knowledge content, but then also civic responsibility and taking action. And so I wanted to highlight here how program participants are assessed, and just share on the next slide our assignment description and rubric. So a little bit of that. So we use this an environmental issues action plan assignment as the big piece that addresses, and you can see now the 4 guidelines there, 1.1 through 1.4 for theme 1. And we have an assignment where students, I love this assignment, I'm teaching this class right now, and students have to identify an environmental issue. They have to write about the social, economic, and environmental impacts of the issue. Then they have to brainstorm actions that they could take, 10 different actions they could take. They have to identify 3 that they're actually going to implement over the course of the semester. And then at the end of the semester, they have to report on how taking those actions went in a paper and in a presentation. And so we've included then in our materials the action plan assignment description, the rubric, and we've shown how that links directly to these pieces here. So questioning, analysis, and interpretation skills, making it really clear for the reviewers how it is that we go about doing that, and how you can, both in what we're teaching, but then also in how we're assessing student work. So through our rubric, how are we showing that students are questioning? How are we showing that they understand environmental processes, that they have skills for understanding and addressing issues, and also that they're taking personal and civic responsibility. So that's an example from the University of Wisconsin Stevens Point. And I'll pass it on to who goes next. Hamlin. Yeah, Patty.
Yeah, thanks. So those couple of examples that were just shared are really excellent, kind of the finer points of what was submitted for their program for different artifacts and everything. So I won't go into too much detail about the specific things that Hamlin has submitted, but I'll just briefly tell you that our program is a master's in environmental education. It's a 34 credit master's program, 5 of which are core courses that are required by everybody. And then students have about 14 credits remaining after that, which they populate with elective courses. And those electives are grouped into different thematic areas or certificates. So we have a climate literacy certificate that students can take. We have a nature-based early learning certificate. And then we have more of a general environmental ed certificate. Our program is about 50% formal educators and 50% non-formal. So we have a really diverse mix of professions represented in our student population. And if anybody is interested in finding out more of the specifics of our program, I'm happy to share that. But what I wanted to talk about today was that when we were submitting our program for accreditation, we really felt that it was important to speak more directly to the equity, inclusion, and environmental justice areas. And so we kind of invented our own additional theme. And I won't read the whole slide to folks here, but we'll share this information with anybody who's interested. But we really felt it was important to identify how each of the classes that we were submitting also addressed this theme. And so we went ahead and just created our own additional page for the table that you looked at earlier. I think it's table 4 that that shows kind of what are the artifacts, what are the assignments and activities, how are students showing competence and understanding in this area. And so we just went ahead and added a page to the table to show how our program and our classes and experiences and how students were demonstrating or how they were being assessed on understanding and engagement with these different themes. And I think it's been really important. It has really helped our program. We've done a number of course audits over the past few years, and this particular theme has been incredibly helpful in us thinking about how we can be more intentional about addressing these issues in every single class in our program.
Cool. Thank you.
That's it. Thanks.
So we get to the questions point of the day. And so just open it up. It's a small enough group. If you have any questions, please just feel free to unmute yourself. And if you're having problems with your audio, you can put your question in the chat and we'll try to address it the best we can. While you're thinking about your questions, I'll let you, sort of stew for just a moment. I did want to tell people, yay, we're going to have an in-person conference again this year. The call for presentations should be coming out relatively soon. It's going to be in Tucson in October. There's both the research symposium and the regular annual conference. So hope to see people there. We'll be really excited. And we'll be able to talk more about accreditation at the conference. Also just wanted to tell you that if you're not a member of EE Pro, you may want to become a member of EE Pro. There are lots and lots of different networking groups, special interest groups that are part of EE Pro, including the higher education group. And Becca is in fact one of the moderators for that group. And it's just a great opportunity, a place to ask questions, share syllabi, things that are happening. You've got an online course that you want to promote. There's just all those types of things, but it's a great way of sharing information and networking with others in the field. And then here is our contact information. If you're particularly interested in Patty's theme 7, you can email her directly, or if you want to know more about doing an endorsement, I'm sure Melinda or Billy would be happy to respond to it. One of the things that I do hope that you take away from this is that it really is a matter of we're trying to make this program as flexible as possible, but having a measure of rigor with the themes, the standards that we use. So if it's an endorsement or a certificate, that's great. Undergrad, grad, that's great. Blended, we don't care. One of the things that Melinda didn't mention, that she basically, in essence, had two programs accredited. She had an undergraduate program and a graduate program. And because the requirements are just slightly different, as you would expect, we actually looked at them sort of at the same time, but separately, so that, you know, there's two programs that are being considered at that point. We also have, you know, things like certificates that you might not be called environmental education. So Patty has a climate change education certificate, which, you know, she's thinking about how she can go about the process of getting that certificate accredited. So it doesn't have to have EE in the title. Don't get constrained over things. It can have interpretation, like Becca's has interpretation in the title, and they have requirements related to interpretation. And some of those requirements help fulfill environmental education. So again, it's all about how you think about your program and how you're going about trying to address the standards that we've set up and how you go about assessing those. So I'm going to stop here for just a second and see if there are any questions from the group. Okay. Does anyone know of success stories from students advocating for their program adopting this? Rather than it being from the professors.
That would be a really good question to put to the higher ed EE Pro group, to maybe organize students who have done this work or who are in or have graduated from accredited programs. That's a really interesting question. I don't know of any efforts underway, but I think that would be really, really good information to have.
Melinda? Yep, you're muted.
Do know of a school that we met them at the meeting in Lexington, and I am looking up their name now. We haven't heard much from them since then. So bear with me just a minute. Sorry about that. Here we go. Here's the resource folder I'm looking for. Prescott.
Oh, Prescott, right.
Prescott College. It was they had a couple students that were actually there. I think they were graduate students that were actually at the conference, and so they actually have not followed through with being accredited. And I'm sure any of you in higher ed institutions understand kind of the turmoil of budget cuts and different people in you know, administrative positions. And so even though they were really gung-ho, I think because of changes in personnel, it has not happened yet.
Yeah, but they are still interested.
Yes.
And they had some changes in their faculty and some new faculty coming on who were working with those graduate students. And so I think, you know, I think they're still in that process of making sure that the program is actually aligned. Because as you can imagine, after seeing this and sort of depending on how familiar you are with the professional development guidelines, is that, you know, it's going to take some, chances are, it's going to take some curriculum changes. And we all know that curriculum changes don't just happen overnight, that there's a whole process that takes place and all that. So it is a process to get everything aligned. But once you're aligned, this part of the process isn't that difficult. It's just that getting things going at your institution. But yeah, the Prescott people, that is a good example.
That brings up
Oh.
another point. If I know some of you have joined because you're thinking about developing your programs or working with institutions to develop programs. The easiest thing to do is develop a program using these guidelines for professional development to develop your courses from the get-go. Billy and I had to learn that it's sometimes hard to take what you already have and not change it completely to meet these guidelines. So if you're starting fresh, that's great. That's great. Use these guidelines, develop the courses based on these, and then move forward with the accreditation.
Yeah, Elena, that's a good point, Melinda. I'd be interested, Elena, in hearing more about, behind your question there. Like, do you know of students who are interested in advocating for that, or are there questions as far as how to make that happen as an outside entity? Somewhat outside?
Mostly I'm thinking of trying to be in support of our professors. So I'm a graduate student, I'm a master's student at Western Carolina University, and our master's program in experiential and outdoor education has environmental education as one of its elements, like one of the threads within the program, if that's what a student's focus area is in. And I think our professors definitely have an interest in becoming accredited, but they're also going through the throes of like a fledgling, program
Right.
with, like you said, administration that is sometimes lackluster in their support. And so I was wondering if there was success stories of students who have like kind of done the legwork of doing the analysis and then like, working with the professors to make it happen rather than it just being on the professors themselves to get it done and push it through.
Just thinking about that, I think what I would do, like to start, I don't know, anybody else can chime in too, of course, but like where I would start, if I was you, is I would start with that course map, the one that lays out like all the courses and themes, and like do your best guess of where you think the themes are popping up. And then bring it to a faculty meeting, bring it to a discipline meeting or a department meeting or whatever, or talk to a professor and say, is this accurate? And then from there, I would take, really, if you have the time and the interest, right, to just take it then and roll like, okay, where's a course information sheet? All right. And take it one step at a time, because sometimes this process can seem overwhelming, but it's really just putting things on paper, so I think if you can do that, if you can help the instructors out, start a course information sheet. What assignments do you think line up? And then eventually you'll get to the point of asking the professor for the data, which is like the easy part, in my opinion.
Yeah. And we have had, I can't remember exactly which university it was. I think it was one of the Pennsylvania ones, that they did have graduate student help in developing their self-audit. And, it was exactly especially if you have courses that go across campus, having somebody who can trot over to the biology department and ask the person for the information helps a lot. So there's been, at least on that end, graduate students. So we have kind of the bookends. We have Prescott, where some of the graduate students were saying, we should do this, we should do this. And then we do have on the back end where they had a program in place where the graduate students were helping out to try to pull together the self-audit. And it was done under the notion, it wasn't just being, a student worker, that kind of thing. The notion was that those graduate students wanted to know more about how higher education worked, and because they had interests of going on in higher education. And so that, it was really a true learning sort of internship type of experience for them. But that's a great question.
Yeah, and it's funny because when you, I don't think we mentioned this at all, but when you submit your accreditation materials, right? Like I was thinking about like how that might be difficult for you to gather everything and know everything as a student, right? Or that idea, like when Bora mentioned going over to the biology department for our reaccreditation, I chose not to do that. I was like, I don't think we have to for our materials. So I'm going to try to keep it simple, even though it was somewhat at the risk of like, ooh, do I think we have enough of that preponderance of evidence to make our case without including some of these courses? But know that when you go through the review process, well, you can always ask Bora or any of us for feedback before you submit stuff. But when you go through the review process, if you aren't accredited the first time, you can always add more materials, right? And put forward your materials again. So just because you might not pass the first time, it doesn't mean that your relationship is over.
Yeah. And one of the things that does happen is that people will submit and will not feel as if, you know, it's particularly strong in an area, or we think that it's just super in areas, and they get that feedback from the reviewers, and it's, you know, as specific as we can make it in terms of what we think the strengths are and what some of the areas are that need improvement, whether or not they get accredited. So even if they're accredited, they get some of that to be able to be continually improving their program. And we try again to be as flexible and kind as we can, so that if we think that it's sort of one of those, well, maybe we just aren't understanding the program as well as we should, then we go back and we say, can you submit any more information about this? And if they can, within like a month or so, then we'll reevaluate it and they might get accredited. So it's not a, we try to be as kind about this and collegial about this as we can, while keeping the standards. People are needing to jump off, and I completely understand that. We will send you an email with, you know, the links and all that kind of stuff. But I did want to point out that we have another webinar coming up. I just put it into our the chat. We have another webinar coming up in about a month. That's just frequently asked questions with opportunity for people to ask more questions. So if through this afterwards, if you go, oh yeah, I wonder if, pop onto that webinar and it'll be much more about your questions as we move along. So thank you, everybody, for joining us, and have a great rest of your week. Oh, that's a really good question. June 15th is our typical date, but again, we're flexible. So if you can't quite make June 15th and you email me in advance and say, hey, yeah, but how about, then, you know, normally we can handle it. And especially these times, you know, we're in those times. We understand we need flexibility. So cool. Thank you so much. Bye, folks.
Bye.
Cool. So
Don't forget to stop recording.
oh, stop. Yes. Okay, wait a second. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to stop. Okay, where's the record? Okay.
I didn't know.